Hello, and welcome to A Crosstalk, a series hosted by Renew America Together, focused on fostering bipartisan dialogue, encouraging civil leadership, and healing the political divisions of our current American society. Renew America Together is a 501c3 established to minimize the effects of divisive rhetoric through bipartisan dialogue and education. My name is Lincoln Zaleski. I'm a disinformation specialist at Renew America Together and the host of A Crosstalk. This is the 7th episode of our series. I'm joined today by Jaclyn O'Day, Executive Director of the Problem Solvers Caucus, a bipartisan independent congressional group committed to finding common ground on many of the key issues facing our nation. Jaclyn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lincoln.
No problem. So we're just going to jump right into the questions. We'll talk first about some of our similarities. Renew America Together and the Problem Solvers Caucus have a lot in common in our message of bipartisan cooperation, building unity and civic engagement, and hoping to heal some of the wounds caused by partisanship. When did you personally recognize the problem of polarization in America, and what made you want to take some steps to try to prevent it?
Well, being bipartisan is something that I've always valued, and it's been an important element for me throughout my entire career, even starting back in the day in 6th grade when I was in student government, all the way through college, time in state government, and certainly my time in Congress working for members. So I would say about 6 years ago, you started hearing more and more how people were upset by family or friends in terms of commentary about politics on social media. And it became too commonplace that people had no longer spoken to a family member or a friend, someone that they've been close with perhaps for a very long time, all because of the polarization of our politics. And I think back to the days after 9/11 when the country was very united. We were proud Americans. Oftentimes people had the yellow magnets on the back of their car trying to heal, the struggles our country went through at that time. And so I certainly wake up every morning passionate to do the right thing because I believe that Americans want their government to work. And it's only when we work together that we're going to be able to move the country forward and continue to be a strong democracy and global leader.
I think that's very insightful. It's one of those things where we've had polarization in our histories past. I mean, America went through a civil war. You think in the 1970s, we were very divided. So it feels a little bit like polarization comes in waves. But I totally agree with the time frame, particularly with this current wave of polarization. As a disinformation specialist, I look a lot at when foreign disinformation or disinformation trends start to happen. And around 2015 is around when Russian disinformation started becoming bigger, when we start to see the effect of social media on election cycles and stuff like that. And so I think following what you just said makes a whole lot of sense.
Well, and I'll also add, if you look at statistics, then about 50% of people get their news from social media. But oftentimes people don't always check, is it a credible news source? Could this potentially be, to your point, a foreign entity that perhaps is trying to appear to be a news source, spreading disinformation? Oftentimes people are busy in their lives, going to school, raising children, working, and they don't always think, is this a credible news source? And so I think it also feeds to the notion of people getting disinformation. And so it's really important people to make sure that they're getting their news from credible sources, especially when everyone's so busy and not always the first thing you think about.
Absolutely. Well, in the spirit of educating people, let's talk a bit about what the Problem Solvers Caucus does. Caucuses are a little bit of a black box for most Americans. They're not really formal pieces of government, not necessarily something you might learn in a civics class, but they're a really important part of the House of Representatives. So can you give the audience a brief overview of the Problem Solvers Caucus and how it works?
I'd be glad to. Well, every caucus in Congress works a little bit different. For the sake of the Problem Solvers Caucus, we are an independent and member-driven group in Congress. We have 58 members in the House of Representatives from all across the country, and we're equally divided between Republicans and Democrats. And our goal is to find common ground and work to find common ground on key issues facing the nation. And we're co-chaired by Representatives Gottheimer and Brian Fitzpatrick, and our members meet weekly. We're really about civility, discourse, and using the strength of our caucus to get behind ideas that appeal to the broad spectrum of the American people. And so, our members will regularly bring forward bipartisan legislation, and they'll work through the caucus using our endorsement process where we get 75% of our members to support something and then, trying to advance things. And so ultimately, we really believe in two-party solutions. We don't think that one party has a monopoly on good ideas, just like how everyone's families operate and personal relationships operate and businesses function. Like, the normal way for us to govern is to work together in two-party solutions, and trying to advance things that Americans want is really at our core and important to the caucus.
That's fantastic. And one of the things that I really admire about the Problem Solvers Caucus is that it's an equal number of Republicans and Democrats. Can you talk a little bit, just briefly, about that process of bringing in both Republicans and Democrats and finding friends across the aisle?
Yeah, of course. So our membership is equally divided between Democrats and Republicans. And so with that, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So when members come in, they come in pairs, with someone from the Democratic side and someone from the Republican side coming in at the same time together. And so keeping that balance is really important, and is part of the identity of the caucus.
That's great. I think it's something that's very important in making sure that you're not alienating the other side and bringing people together in a physical fashion, not just in a metaphorical way.
Yeah, I mean, it also feeds to our endorsement process, right? So if we're going to say 75% of our members get behind something, then that's 51, at a minimum 51% on both sides. We have to ensure also membership is balanced, and also it keeps the group energy and everything balanced, and making sure that we're being mindful of the broad views of Americans and states, and taking a lot of different viewpoints into consideration in terms of the work that we do for the country.
So, to be a contrarian, many in this country believe that the work that you and I do is kind of ultimately futile. There's a lot of politicians that benefit from polarization and having a very divided society. Some might argue that it's easier for politicians to vilify opponents in a polarized society, and re-election can be a lot simpler when people are afraid of the opposition. So after working with US representatives in a bipartisan context, do you believe that your member politicians truly believe in crossing the aisle? Do they really believe in this mission?
What I see on a weekly basis, the discourse between our members, the level of respect, civility, it is truly incredible, and something that I'm really proud of our members in terms of really working hard to try to find those common sense solutions to tough challenges, and working to break gridlock to help people back home in their districts, right? And it's with the mindset that it's better to get 80% of something than getting nothing. Certainly, compromise doesn't have to be a dirty word, because ultimately it's when we work together that we come out with a solution that's not just going to last when one party's in charge, but a long-standing, solid solution that is sustainable for the future, and really gets at the core of addressing issues that need to be worked on. I think it is positive work, and I get up motivated and energized every single day, and we continue to make progress.
That's fantastic. Similar to that, what is the most concerning part of partisanship and polarization in America for you? Is there a social trend or something about polarization that really keeps you up at night, makes you concerned for the future of the country?
Well, it doesn't keep me up at night, but certainly, Americans love to be entertained. And so often it's members in Congress that get the most attention are the extremes, right? So often it's the extremes. It's the extreme left and the extreme right. Oftentimes you've heard names like AOC or Marjorie Taylor Greene. You don't hear as much about our members and the work they're doing, because their focus is governing. And so I think, concern in general, become these echo chambers on social media, where people, again, spreading misinformation, people just kind of tuning in and thinking that Congress is just a divisive place where elected officials come to fight instead of govern. And that's truly not the case. There's a lot of incredible bipartisan work that takes place every single week. People are busy, and unfortunately, it's just sometimes the loudest voices that get the most attention, not the ones that are governing and doing the really incredible hard work to move the country forward and tackle issues that matter to Americans.
It's true. One of the most interesting parts of studying propaganda and disinformation is seeing exactly how much media sensationalism focuses on the far poles. And the majority of Congress is much more centralized, much more right down the middle. And so seeing that kind of polarized nature get all the attention really makes Americans feel separated, feel like they have to choose, that everything's black and white. So I think it is a breath of fresh air to hear that there is a lot of work in the gray, work across the aisle in Congress.
It just doesn't make the headlines. But yeah, there's a lot of good work It's just oftentimes people may be focused on one or two issues that are most important to them. Perhaps they're not in tune with the nuances of running some of our federal agencies to ensure that people are getting the benefits they need and the assistance they need from the government. But there's a lot of hard work and stuff that happens that doesn't always elevate to someone's Twitter feed or Facebook feed or make it into the nightly news.
And that's really important. And it's particularly important to bring that to the attention of our audience. So for those in the audience that see some of the problems in our current political system, some of the stuff that we're talking about with echo chambers, media sensationalism, not being able to talk at the dinner table or at the Thanksgiving table coming up with certain family members about certain political things, and they want to make a change, but they're not really sure how they can help, what actions would you encourage individuals at home to take?
Well, I oftentimes, obviously, I really value working with both sides of the aisle. And so I think it's important in my mind, in my mind, at least, it's not, a debate about Republicans versus Democrats. For me, it's a broader discussion about centrism versus extremism. And I think it's important for people, to make sure that you're getting behind elected officials that are going to do the hard work and going to work on sustainable long-term solutions to issues to make our country strong for our parents, for people's children, and ultimately the country that we all love so much. People certainly should be mindful of who they're selecting when they go to the ballot box and voting. And I also say be mindful of where you get your news. I love to go on all the three major news networks every single day and making sure I'm getting a balanced viewpoint, watching Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, and then also the local news across the country. So I do that. And then I certainly also get my news from a variety of sources. And so switch up your news, sign up for your members of Congress's newsletters. Problem Solvers Caucus, we have a newsletter we encourage people to sign up for as well. And so you also can throw on C-SPAN occasionally and watch for yourself what's going on.
I think that's fantastic advice. Having all different types of, obviously every media news source has its own bias, and having all different types of news and then all the different angles coming at you will paint a better picture than just hearing it from one source or one slant or one angle. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it helps me get a very balanced perspective, and really helps me understand when people start talking about issues, understanding how they're viewing them and making sure that we're keeping a very balanced perspective to arrive at common sense solutions to make progress for the American people.
I think that's great. The closing question for the show is always the same. We've gotten a whole slew of different answers from Maya Angelou to Abraham Lincoln to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. If there is one policymaker, civil society figure that you admire or try to emulate, past or present, who would it be?
Well, I'm from Illinois, so even though you mentioned it's been taken previously, I'm going to go with Abraham Lincoln. And the reason I picked Lincoln is the way he used his second inaugural address. It was a very unique thing that he did. He didn't try to come out and boast his popularity and his success of breaking the South. He didn't denounce his enemies, even though slaveholding states. What he did is, in a very short 5-minute speech, he essentially argued that all Americans, North and South, they shared culpability for the horrible things that happened and what the nation had endured. And he came out. And again, at the time, the country was overwhelmingly Christian as well. So he certainly had that in mind. It was a different time and place. He shared that it was, both the North and South that prayed to the same God. And so ultimately, they were suffering on both sides, right? And so he really wanted to plead to Americans, to finish the war and seek a lasting peace, right? And so there's a quote I think about all the time from his speech that resonates with me. It's something along the lines of, with malice towards none, and with charity to all. And so I think often to how Lincoln was able to heal a divided nation. And so this has been done. And so for those out there that think I'm never going to talk to my cousin again, or I'm not going to talk to that friend from childhood, like there's a way to heal our divisions, right? And it's when we seek to understand each other and respectfully disagree. That's something that our members really do. If they disagree, they will put forward another solution, right? You can't just say I disagree, right? You have to propose another idea. And so it's that civility, it's that discourse. And again, it's following Lincoln's example of recognizing that we all share oftentimes in our current situation. It's those harsh words, they don't pay off. Rarely they do. We are all flawed. And so it's a complicated world of politics, and everyone has a variety of different motives. And certainly it's when we work together and put the past behind us, we can move forward and continue to be the world superpower.
I think that's fantastic. I will never say anything bad about my namesake. Abraham Lincoln is a fantastic choice, a really admirable figure. Makes a lot of sense for you to choose him. Thank you so much for joining the show, Jaclyn. It's been really great chatting with you and learning about the Problem Solvers Caucus. The website for the Problem Solvers Caucus is linked in the description below. So go check them out and investigate how they are fostering bipartisan dialogue and civility in Congress. Stay tuned for coming episodes of A Crosstalk next month. Feel free to visit Renew America Together's website for more information about bipartisanship and healing American divisions, as well as research about disinformation campaigns and voter fraud. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more bipartisan conversations. Thanks so much.